Joining me now to discuss is Tom Gross, political analyst from Tel Aviv. Tom, welcome to the program.
Hello.
Now, Israel has supported the two-week ceasefire, but has clearly stated that Lebanon is not included. How sustainable can this ceasefire be when it doesn't cover all active fronts?
Well, it should be an entirely separate issue. I mean, Lebanon does not share a border with Iran. Hezbollah in Lebanon have been attacking Israel on and off since the group was founded 2 or 3 decades ago. It is a foreign implant in Lebanon. And as Vice President J.D. Vance said, why does Iran think Lebanon should be included, or Hezbollah should be included in the ceasefire? It should not concern Iran. So it is whether or not there should be a ceasefire in Lebanon is a separate issue. Maybe they should, but it wasn't party, as the Americans and Israelis said, to the ceasefire between the United States and Iran.
So the IDF carried out strikes on more than 100 Hezbollah targets shortly after the ceasefire announcement. Do you think this indicates Israel seeking to shape the battlefield before the full truce, if there's going to be a full truce, takes full effect?
Well, it's more simple than that. Israel, or the government of Israel, has promised the citizens of Israel in the north of the country, and to remind you, Israel is a very small country, so it's promised the population in the north, which is maybe 20 or 25% of the country, that they can return to their homes and they won't have to live under constant rocket fire at civilian targets in Israel from Lebanon, from Hezbollah. So it is an aim of the government of Israel, as it will be the aim of any government, to protect its citizens. So quite apart from anything that's happening in Iran, Israel is determined once and for all to have peace on its border with Lebanon. And the basic offer, Israel says, is when Israeli civilians can live in peace in northern Israel, so the south of Lebanon could also, should also live in peace. But we have to understand that this is not a conflict between Israel and Lebanon. It's a conflict with Hezbollah, which are a radical Shia militant organization, Hezbollah, party of Allah, of God. And, they don't only hold Israel hostage, they hold Lebanon hostage, because Lebanon cannot function as a state when you have this radical movement, which is in a way more powerful than the Lebanese army, that is very, very well funded by, in the past, the government of Iran, but also by its illicit drugs trade. It's got a massive drugs trade in Africa and Latin America and so on. And it is in the interest of everyone that Hezbollah is disarmed, as it should have been many years ago, according to UN resolutions. And I think it's very, very unhelpful for governments in Europe, like the government of France, to in effect be supporting Hezbollah and trying to save Hezbollah. If anybody wants a better future in Lebanon, as well as Israel and other countries, Hezbollah should not anymore play a disruptive role in launching rockets and killing people. And just to remind people, Hezbollah hasn't only killed Israelis, they've killed a lot of people in Syria. They were closely aligned with the Assad government. And they've also killed a lot of people in Lebanon. They had that big port explosion a couple of years ago, in which I think thousands were killed and injured by Hezbollah, chemical weapons and other materials stored in the ports that went off. And they've also been responsible in the past for murdering Hariri, the Prime Minister of Lebanon. Hezbollah are not a group that anybody should be trying to keep in place and saving it with yet another ceasefire.
Okay, so I know you're very clear on that the Hezbollah fighting with Israel should be kept separate to the Iran conflict that's going on. But does excluding Lebanon from the ceasefire risk undermining confidence in the broader diplomatic process? So could continued strikes against Hezbollah complicate these mediation efforts that are currently underway? But we know Pakistan's Prime Minister had previously said that the agreed ceasefire covered everywhere, including Lebanon.
Yes, I think Pakistan's Prime Minister was mistaken when he said that. That's certainly what the United States says, and also Israel. Will it complicate matters? Perhaps. But there are already so many complications and hard matters. Look, if one of the demands of the United States, and indeed of Sunni Arab countries too, is that Iran stops weaponizing and supporting and arming all these proxies in the Middle East, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, Hamas in Gaza, various militia in Iraq, previously in Syria, and so on. This is one of the demands of the ceasefire, that Iran stops, militarizing groups in a whole number of other countries. If Hezbollah were willing to announce that they will disarm, become a regular political party in Lebanon, then there will be no conflict in Lebanon or with Lebanon. So it could complicate matters, but so will all the American demands complicate matters. It's also a demand of America in the international community that they give up their enriched uranium in Iran, that they open the Straits of Hormuz. They stop interfering in a whole bunch of other countries I've just mentioned, like Iraq and Syria and Lebanon and Yemen and Israel and Gaza. So, all these things can complicate the ceasefire, but the ceasefire isn't going to last unless the Iranians show flexibility on all of these issues.
Okay. All right, let's move on now to President Trump's messaging on social media. He shifted in tone in the final hours before the ceasefire announcement. Does this suggest the complexity of negotiations behind the scene, or what does it suggest about the complexity of negotiations behind the scene?
Well, I think first and foremost, it shows the complexity of President Trump's mind and President Trump's negotiating skills. Sometimes he contradicts himself, not just between one tweet and another. He contradicts himself within a single paragraph or even within a single sentence. He'll say on one hand that there's been regime change in Iran and got a much more reasonable and pragmatic and moderate regime now in Iran, which is not the case, of course. And then he'll also say in the same paragraph that the regime is horrible and we're going to teach them a lesson and set back civilization and so on. So it's very hard to know what to make of it. I would say that Trump is employing what's known as the madman theory, whereby he deliberately is trying to muddy the waters and confuse his opponents as a negotiating ploy. And I think we have to look more carefully at what Trump actually does, rather than every sentence in his tweets, which we should not take literally because he says all kinds of things. Yeah.
Okay. Tom, thank you very much for joining us on the program. Thank you for your analysis today.
You're welcome. Thank you.